A blessed day, everyone. Welcome to BSM TV. We welcome you to our midweek studies. Today, as you all know, we're living in a kind of hard times that we are in now, but we thank God for His continual protection on His people and for giving us this opportunity to listen to His voice and talk about His goodness. Today, without wasting much time, our lesson is coming from, actually it's entitled The Church or the Movement. This comes up as a lesson to appeal actually for the people of God in the last days to understand what is a movement, what is a church, which of the two is the best portion to find ourselves immersed into. We will see as we look at the church. A church, normally people, when they talk about churches, they are talking about buildings, people, congregation, and set laws and set procedures and formalities in which they use to formulate different churches. A movement, on the other side, comes as a group of people. We have seen some movement, October movement, as a group of people trying to reform a certain way that people have been used to do. So they do that by actually advocating and working together in small group of numbers as compared to a church. So what is a movement and what is a church is what we want to deal with today in our midweek studies. So which one do I have to go for should be our ultimate question. So we will start here from a quotation that comes from DD 37.2. You just punch DD in your Ellen G. White estate and it will come up. It says, "But God will have a people upon the earth to maintain the Bible and the Bible only as the standard of all doctrines and the basis of all reforms. The opinions of learned men, the deductions of science, the creeds or decisions of ecclesiastical councils, as numerous and discordant as are the churches which they represent, the voice of majority, not one nor all of these should be regarded as evidence for or against any religious point of faith. Before accepting any doctrine or precept, we should demand a plain 'Thus saith the Lord' in its support." So this is DD. Is telling us that before the coming of the Lord, God will have a people upon the earth who will maintain the Bible and the Bible only as the standard of any reform. If they want to reform on any point of their faith, it has to come from the Bible. But at that same time, while they are while they are doing Bible and Bible only, at that time, there will be opinions of learned men, there will be deductions of science, there will be creeds, decisions of ecclesiastical councils, as discordant as they may be, representing each and every church. So do you see there's a demarcation now? So there will be a movement that will be taking the Bible and the Bible only And on the other side, we have the ecclesiastical councils, the churches and their leaders. So that's why sometimes you see in your church, you cannot have another pastor from another church coming to your church to preach. Why? Because if they don't belong to that church, it's a no-go area. But what God is talking about here, He will have a people that will maintain the Bible as the standard. The Bible as the standard. If they have to wake up on their left side, they have to jot it from the Bible. They have to take it from the Bible. For everything that they do, they have to demand a "thus saith the Lord." Isn't that true? So we'll read another one which comes from Christian Service, page 42.4. You can punch CHS 42.4. This is Sister White as well. She's saying here, in visions of the night, representations passed before me of a great reformatory movement among God's people. Many were praising God. The sick were healed, and other miracles were wrought. Hundreds and thousands were seen visiting families and opening before them the word of God. Hearts were convicted by the power of the Holy Spirit, and a spirit of genuine conversion was manifest. On every side, doors were thrown open to the proclamation of the truth. The world seemed to be lightened with the heavenly influence. Blessings were received by the true and humble people of God. So this is Christian Service, page 42. Now, he's talking about this vision that Sister White had of a great reformatory movement among God's people. So there will be a movement among God's people, which means the church will be there, but at the side there will be what is called a reformatory movement. So if they are reforming something that the church is not willing to do, then they become a movement. They are not a church. We know the church is tied up with ecclesiastical councils, which gives them the laws and everything, the procedures, the manuals of how to run the church. But the movement, on the other hand, is governed by God. And here I say the Holy Spirit will be part and parcel of the what? Of the movement. And one thing I liked about this movement that Sister White saw on is also seen in 90, if you can punch 9126, you can find the same vision there. When this movement starts, this reformation starts, it's not left to a certain sect of people to declare the word of God. Many will be praising God. How will they be praising God? By speaking the truth, right? And the sick were healed. Hundreds and thousands were visiting families. So it's a norm of a movement that when they receive the power or when they receive the truth, what do? They start visiting families. You know, all these door-to-doors that you see people coming to your doors, and you close it, is the movement. Because the church, we know, it closes the doors, say, we are the people of God. We don't want any intruder. We have got our pastors, we have enough. We have got this and that. They count all those things. But this reformatory movement is coming within the church. That's what Sister White was showing. It was among God's people. And they saw families being visited. And that was part of a movement. Now, when we are coming to this question of what is a church and what is a movement. Now we see the difference. Another angle that we can look at it, when Christ came, Christ had his 12 disciples, and there was the Jewish church on the other side. Christ grew in the Jewish church. We all know that. From a young age, he was in that church. That's the church that brought him up. But when he was 27 years, when he was baptized, we see him taking on a new mission, which is to reform the Jewish church. And with the 12 disciples, they became a movement within the church, isn't it? Or within the people of God. But the church at that time had also their leaders, which were the ecclesiastical councils on that day, and Christ on the other side with his disciples. So in terms of numbers, a movement does not possess a lot of people. It possesses a little bit of people, but they move on a notion and realistic ideas that will make their agenda known. Now, we see with the disciples, they were powerful people, no education, but very powerful. They were just fishmongers, but they were powerful. What made them powerful is because they were willing to be taught and willing to do and to dare. But people who were in the church now, or in the people of God, the church, the reason why they did not, someone will think, I'll give it as a question. Someone will think, why did not Christ take the whole Jewish church, or go and lead the Jewish church and dispose all the priests, right? He could have done that. But one thing that people need to know is, once the churches establish themselves, it's very hard for God to penetrate. Now, you will see here, what do they do? The existing, this is EP, eternity past, the existing confusion of conflicting creeds and sects is fitly represented by the term Babylon, which prophecy applies to world-loving churches of the last days. So what the church does, they formulate what we have heard here called conflicting creeds. So these creeds are like a formal way of running the church. So when you have a creed, normally you put away the Bible. You see it in 1BIO. It says when you have creeds, or when you have procedures and manuals to run a church, what you are putting aside is the Bible, because the Bible is ever moving. The light of God is ever shining from his word. So there's no time that you say, the light has stopped shining, we have set our stakes, we cannot move any further or beyond. Because this is the problem with the Laodicean period that we are in, the last of the 7 churches. They are increased with goods and in need of nothing. But they don't know one thing, that they are wretched, miserable, and unless they buy eye salve to see, God will spew them. So God is saying here, in this, what makes them think that they are increased with goods, they have need of nothing, it is because they have got conflicting creeds, which is fitly represented by the term Babylon, isn't it? Because it prophesies of the world-loving churches in the last days. Now, why is it God saying here they are world-loving churches in the last days, and he calls them Babylon? Because when the world is celebrating certain things, we see even the church of God is united with them. When there's no demarcation, not at all. But when they are called to do the things of God, we see them denying unanimously. So that is it's a prescription for being in Babylon. Yeah, for being in Babylon, that you are world loving. You've got conflicting creeds. You want to do the Lord's Supper, but you want to do it in the morning, and you call it Lord's Supper. It's a conflicting creed. Do you see? It's conflicting. You say Lord's Supper in the evening. How conflicting is it? So that's why God is saying that confusion that they have, they rightly term it a Babylon. Yeah. DD 37, I think we read this one, point 2. We read that one. We'll read Great Controversy, page 604, as we wind up. So it says, but God still has a people in Babylon, and before the visitation of his judgments, these faithful ones must be called out. So God is giving us a scenario here whereby he's saying, you have seen that these churches, they've got conflicting creeds. The churches are not a movement. A reformatory movement, we saw it in 126, where Sister White is talking about a great reformatory movement. So it's up to you to be part of a reformatory movement or part of the church. You choose which one you like, which one give you taste to your spiritual life. Some will just say, as long as I'm worshiping, but some will want the Bible truth. Some, they don't mind. Even if you say Lord's Supper at dawn, or Lord's Supper whatever time, they don't mind. They don't mind. We have seen churches now, these days, any churches are forming on any basis. Some, they just tell you, we have seen that there's a gap in the Christian church. There is no church that drinks beer, so ours accommodates everyone who drinks beer. Yeah, they can do that. But only, I'm not saying they're wrong, but if they have to be part of the great reformatory movement, what do they have to do? They have to use the Bible as the basis of every reformation. Yeah. When they say New Year's Day, they need to say, is it New Year from God? Don't just say Happy New Year, because there are many New Years that are in the world that are not from the Spirit of God. So they have to know. Don't say, it's just a day. I don't mind. You have to mind, because it's either you are in the churches or you are in the reformatory movement. And they say, because some will say, because we are keeping the Sabbath, some are keeping these days, so we are different. No, we are. If as long as you have ecclesiastical council authorities that are directing your way and giving you these creeds that you are seeing, they are conflicting. One time you've got the Sabbath, hallelujah. Next time you have Father's Day. Where is it coming from? Next time you've got Christmas. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from? Okay, show us, isn't it? So God here say these conflicting creeds and theories, he has people in the Babylon, and if they want to join this reformatory movement, they have to listen and come out. Why are they being called to come out? Because God knows that the faithful ones will, the ones who are advocating for the world things, will never allow them to practice those things or the things of God while they are still commingled. You see, it's their churches. What did they do in the time of Christ? Everyone believed on him. Even the top priests, they believed on him. But they dared not confess his name for fear of being thrust out of the synagogues. This is the same thing. Some will know that this is the truth, but they will never confess it. Why? Because they are scared of being removed from their churches they love. Some they love singing, some they love just that fellowship. But if you have to be part of the great reformatory movement, we see you have to dare to be like Daniel. You have to stand alone. Make sure a plain thus said the Lord is in everything, in the support of everything that we do. As long as there is no thus said the Lord, take it with a pinch of salt. Take it with a pinch of salt. Now it says, but God still has a people. This is great controversy. But God still has a people in Babylon. And before the visitation of his judgments, these faithful ones must be called out, that they partake not of her sins and receive not of her plagues. Hence, the movement symbolized by the angel coming down from heaven, lightening the earth with his glory, and crying mightily with a strong voice, announcing the sins of Babylon. In connection with his message, the call is heard, come out of here, my people. These announcements, uniting with the third angel's message, constitute the final warning to be given to the inhabitants of the earth. This is a clear, brethren, a clear, simple way that God is just highlighting in front of us. So there is the third angel's message, which is the church or the Sabbath church. What God is doing now is to bring Revelation 18. You know, Revelation 14 is all first, second, third angel's message. But what God is doing now is to bring Revelation 18. That's why, but Revelation 18 now is no longer a church. God is saying, hence the movement symbolized by the angel coming down. So Revelation 18 is now a movement. So do you see where we were saying church and movement? Church or movement? Which one between these two? Because in the last day, when Revelation 18 is coming, it is a movement. But this movement is going to lighten the whole earth with its glory. Now, someone will say, how are they lightening the earth with its glory? By maintaining the Bible and Bible only as the standard of all doctrines and reforms. Now, someone will say, our churches are already lightening the earth. No. To lighten the earth with the glory of God is to lighten with every aspect of our doing according to how God has designed it. So when we say Lord's Supper, according to how God designed it. When we say good year, new year, happy new year, as how God has designed it. We call it week of Passover, is exactly as how the Lord designed it. Feast of Tabernacles, Feast of Pentecost, all those. Not taking the Feast of the Beast and mingling them and think that we have. It's only people who are in the ecclesiastical councils who are giving us these to formulate the new time religion. But we want the old time religion that was given to Abraham. And we see is saying this announcement uniting with the third angel's message constitute the final warning. So what constitutes the final warning is a reformatory movement. Once you see there is a reformatory movement among the third angel's message, know for sure that we are hearing the final warning. But do the people in the third angel's message listen? They think that the third angel's message is everything they need. But for some awakening to them, they find that even the third angel's message, they don't have it in its verity. Because the third angel was warning them to worship not the beast, because you shall receive the mark of his on your and the indignation of God, isn't it? It's Revelation 14 verse 9. So if the third angel was the warning against worshiping of the beast, what is the church doing when they say Happy New Year, Happy Father's Day, Happy what this, Happy what? The only thing that God was unhappy with the children of Israel, you can read Exodus chapter 5 verse 2. It says he called the children of Israel so that they keep the feast of the Lord. Because what were they keeping in Egypt? The feast of the gods, isn't it? The gods of war, I don't know. But when he took them out, he wanted them to worship his feasts on his feast, for worship him on his days. That's the same thing in our time. Is what he wants us to worship him on his days. Now, that's why we are debating church or movement. I think the movement here, from what we are reading, the movement possesses aspects of salvation that we dare not temper around. Yeah, because it's lightening the earth. In the church, if you stay, because the climax of all this is saying, come out. Because Revelation, the movement of Revelation 18 is coming with a definite message of coming out of the churches, so that you join the movement, the reformatory movement. Now, it comes up to me in a way that if you read a topic in Levi Matthew, where Jesus, in Desire of Ages, like Levi Matthew, and he ordained the 12, how he was calling his disciples Christ. Yeah, somewhere from the Sanhedrin, Levi Matthew was a tax collector. He was picking people, right? And they were so happy to be part of that movement. And for Matthew, especially, you remember, he is the only disciple, or he is the only disciple that Jesus directly said, follow me. Did you hear? Follow me. Now, when you look at this reformatory movement, there are some people whom God would directly say, follow me in this reformatory movement. And some would decide to stay. But we know from previous history that those who stayed in that Jewish church, they ended up killing Christ. So, do you see the benefits of going into the movement? Even the children of Israel, they had to be in a movement. That's why it was called the Exodus movement. God does not want us to be stagnant and brood about the things that we have. Once we do that, that's how people ended up making those graven images. Why? Because once they attain certain things, they build monuments so that they don't forget. But God wants for us not to forget, is to keep us busy, opening all the channels for the truth to come in us every time. So here, we'll read a book called Spirit of Prophecy in the Advent Movement, or SPIAM, page 11.4. Spirit of Prophecy in the Advent Movement. It says, just before the second coming of the Lord and the final harvest. The prophet saw a special gospel movement rise, bearing a message to all the world. In these prophecies, we are dealing with symbols, and here, under the figure of angels preaching, we must be, under the figure of angels preaching must be represented a movement carried on by men, for not unto angels, but unto men has God committed the ministry of reconciliation. The prophet says of this movement of all the world evangelism proceeding the coming of Christ. Do you see? This book has put it clear that the world, all world evangelism, like Revelation 18, is lightening the whole earth. So it's a worldwide extent. But the only thing that we need to know there, it is a movement. There is no church that has ever, even go back to the Jewish church, there's no church that has ever lightened the whole earth with the glory of God. But God has in times brought a reformatory movement. Look at when they were in Babylon, the children of Israel, what happened? He had 3 Hebrew boys. A little reformatory movement within the church. Because if he doesn't have that, the whole church will slumber and what? And sleep. So which one would you rather be in? A movement or in the church? And remember, the church is always seen fighting Christ. Now on Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1, you see these 7 women taking hold of one man and saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel. Let us be called by thy name. What are they saying? They are saying we don't want anything from the man, but we just want his name. But we will drink our own what? Drink our own, eat our own food, wear our own apparel. Some people think, oh, it's these movements that are coming where women want to be empowered. No, that is a representation of the 7 churches, or the whole 7 means complete Christendom. What are they saying? We want to be Christians, to be called by the name of this man who is Christ, and we want to eat our own bread, to wear our own apparel, our own righteousness, and then we just want your name to take away our reproach. Because why do they stick by the word Christians? Because if they remove Christians, that name Christ in the mix, people will see them for who they are. Just imagine your church takes the name Christ. What's left? Anything that belongs to Christ. Let's just take everything that you think is from Christ. What is left? What is left in that church? Some says, nothing. There's a lot that will be left. All your holidays, all your Lord's Suppers that are not, you call them Lordis, they should be Lordis as the word. But your Lord's Suppers, your days, your Valentine's days, what will be left is that in the world. So do you see what they've done? They've just taken what is in the world and put Christ. So they've put a name for you of that man, so that it takes away their reproach, so that no one sees, oh, it's I think it's to do with God. Even Christmas, they say it's the birth of Christ, but now everyone doesn't say that. They know it wasn't. Now they say it's just a period that we want the church to do whatever they say. But when you saw that it is not the birth of Christ, what did you do? Do you see? That's why God is calling for a reformation. I'm not saying Christmas is wrong. Christmas is a lovely time for people, but if you want to be in a reformatory movement, what do you have to do? You have to look for Bible and Bible only as a standard of any reform. Right, so 1BIO 1 BIO, that's where we're going to finish our study here. 1 BIO 453.5. So it's a topic called a creed versus the spirit of prophecy. So it's just like the church, they have their creeds, versus the spirit of prophecy, which is the movement. It's straightforward here. And you remember, I gave you an example of the Jewish church in the time of Christ was fighting Christ, and Christ was a movement with his 12 disciples. And you remember, one of those Pharisees came to him to tempt him and said, what can I do that I may inherit eternal life? And Christ says, love God with all thy heart, all thy mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. And they said, who is my neighbor? You remember that question. Who then is my neighbor? Why did they worry about their neighbor? Because they know God. The relationship of God is something that we cannot prove. I can tell you, I love God awesomely, but how can I prove that? It's just words that we say. Even the churches, all that you hear is all the words. You cannot prove it. But what do we prove that we love God is loving your neighbor as thyself. But there is a big point on there, a big question, because when Christ said that question, when the Pharisee asked Christ that question, did you hear the reply? The reply was, when he asked, who is thy neighbor then? Who is then my neighbor? And Christ said, a certain man was coming from Jerusalem to Jericho, isn't it? And he got mugged, and you know the story of the Good Samaritan. So why did Christ then insert the story of a Good Samaritan when he's answering, what shall I do to be saved? Do you get it? And he says, for you to be saved, you have to be like a Good Samaritan, isn't it? That's the basis. To be like God, which to love God with all thy heart. We say we cannot prove it. But the second part of that question is to love your neighbor like the Good Samaritan. So the Good Samaritan, what Christ was talking about, what did the Good Samaritan do? A lot of people think it's about the binding of the wound, and it's about him paying off the inn and giving food to that man. It's not all about that. It's not all about that. If you read Jeremiah 23 and Isaiah, you see God, his main problem with all over since the world began has not been against people who sin. That one is no problem, he knows. But he has been against the shepherds of his flock. The shepherds, those who are in the ecclesiasticals, and they say they are people of God when they are actually fighting against him. That's why there is a big chapter against the shepherds. Even Jeremiah has it. So what is God saying here? When we look at the Good Samaritan, the gist or the main aim that Christ was saying, because Christ was a reformatory movement within the Jewish church, what he was saying is salvation does not come from the rabbi who came and passed the wounded man, the priest who come and passed the wounded man, but it comes from a Good Samaritan, someone who doesn't look like they deserve to do the work of God, isn't it? Someone who is, a lot of times we think our spiritual help will come from the priest, the rabbi, the elder. Those, Christ saw them not doing the work. They just want to be called. What were they rushing for? For a service, but the service was right in front of them, isn't it? So they want to be called Christians, but not doing that work of being Christian. So that's why Christ is saying in the reformatory movement, what is he doing? He's doing the work with a good Samaritan. Who is a good Samaritan? He's a prophet of God in the last day. So it's something that we will learn and learn until we grasp it. I know some people just want that the explanation of the wounds and that's it. But God is saying your spiritual help when you are wounded and need to know the truth so that you are well nourished in the things of God, you need a good Samaritan. If you think you need a priest, good luck. If you think you need an elder, good luck. You need a good Samaritan. That's why here in 1 BIO, page 453, God is talking of a creed. Who is your elder, your priest who's running away from duty, who's not giving you a good prescription for your problems, versus the spirit of prophecy, which is the good Samaritan. So God is saying, I am, through Sister White, is saying, I am convinced not by what the brethren have said, for I was convinced before. I wish to say a word now in favor of the resolution. I prefer that the brethren should be uniform in this thing. This would tend to unity in the church. Let us set right example here. Let it go throughout from this meeting. On the subject of creeds, I agree. I never weighed the points which was been presented, as I have since begun to examine the subject myself. In Ephesians 4 verse 11 to 13, we read, and he gave some apostles, some prophets, etc. Here we have the gifts given to the church. Now I take the ground that creeds stand in direct opposition to the gifts. Let us suppose a case. We get up a creed stating that we shall believe on this point and on the other, and just what we should do in reference to this thing and that, and say that we will believe the gifts too. So Sister White here is giving us a good comparison of people who use the creeds or these formalities, yeah, church manuals, yeah, church procedures, and what those things. God is saying here through Sister White, let us suppose we have stated in our creeds how we run things. Say A, from A, we have written it down that we from A to B we do like this, from C to D we do like this, and we want to believe the gifts, which is the spirit of prophets, which is the prophet of God, isn't it? We want to believe that too. Do you see? Then, but suppose the Lord, through the gifts, should give us some new light that did not harmonize with our creed. Then God will surprise us and bring something that does not harmonize with our creeds. Because our creeds, what do they do these days? You vote for emotion, isn't it? That's how they do. They come up with creeds. They vote for the emotion and say, we don't want to kneel for God. Who don't want to kneel? Everyone, hands up. And then they count. And then they move the motion. And that's how they formulate creeds. That's how they formulate church manuals. That's how they formulate all these things, conflicting creeds. But let us suppose we have formulated that one. We have voted and said this and that. But God, through the Good Samaritan, through the reformatory movement, has something that does not harmonize with what? With our creed. What happens? Then if we remain true to the gifts, yeah, it knocks our creed over all over at once. Do you see? So let's say the one that we are used to is about the Lord's Supper. Let's say the creed is saying we will take it at 11 o'clock in the morning. And then God, through his reformatory movement, he comes and he is trying to reform the church to be at the standard of God. He comes and says, you know, when we were saying even there, we really meant at night. That's how even the children of Israel took the Lord's Supper or the Passover at night. And even Christ on Matthew chapter 26, verse 20, when even was come, that's when he ate it. So when we are saying Lord's Supper, it's actually night time and it's supposed to be taken once a year. This is the new light. Suppose the Lord has done that. The creed, this truth should knock our creeds all over at once. Do you see? Should knock the creed all over at once, but does it? These days we see it doesn't. Why? Because people are making that motion, isn't it? So making a creed is setting stakes and barring up the way to all future advancement. Do you see? When you make a creed, when you make a church, what you are doing only, you are barring the way of the Lord for any future advancement. What was the purpose of the Jewish church when Christ was here? It was just to block Christ. Satan was very successful in blocking Christ. So the church, instead of being a place to help people to meet Christ, was the object of fighting the people not to meet Christ. So the same thing, if you think, that was a long time, the same thing is happening in our time. The churches are now being used to keep away the people from meeting Christ. But the only person who will be saved is the one who will listen to the Good Samaritan. And those who will look for the great men of religion, those who have been long in this religion, will be lost in the way because they have trusted to intellect, to genius, and degrees of theology. God will bypass. God will bypass. Making a creed is setting the stakes and barring up the way for all future advancement. Once you have a church manual, what you are saying is we don't want to be moved. Do you see? Is in line with the Laodicean movement, which says we are good, we are increased with goods and have no need of anything. But God is saying you are so miserable. So God puts gifts into the church for a good and great object, but men who have got up their churches have shut up the way or have marked out a course for the Almighty. So the people, when they say our church, they are not saying God's church. Even if they say God's church, what they are saying is our church. We will check you out of our church. If you just do this, we'll take you out of our church, isn't it? But be happy because God has got another ledger. Don't worry about church books. God has got another ledger, yeah, which contains everyone, whether you are in church or you are not. But you will be safe if you are following a reformatory movement. So here saying, God puts the gifts into the church for a good and great object. When Christ was in the church, it was a good and great purpose to be there. But what was the church thinking? A devilish person that has ever come, a demonic. But who had the demon? It was them. But men who have got up their churches have shut up the way or have marked out a course for the Almighty. Yeah? What has been tied on this earth is the same thing in heaven. No. What God is doing or has done, or what the churches have done, is actually marking the way for God to follow. So they'll set up things and then they say, God was spoken. But actually, is the other way around. They should look for what does God say in what we are about to do. That's why I like Ahasuerus, king of Israel, in the day when there was Jezebel. Ahasuerus would always ask, what does God say about this? Even a stupid war, just going to fight, yeah, he will say, what does God say? Let's look for a man of God and ask, what does God say? Yeah, stop a minute, and everything that you want to do, just think a little bit. What does God say about this? What does God say about this? Just that, than just, let's do, let's do. It has consequences. It has consequences. Now, here it says, they say virtually that the Lord must not do anything further than what has been marked out in the creed. That's what they are doing. You wonder why people are not forthcoming when it comes to third angel's message, fourth angel's message, fifth angel's message. Why are they not forthcoming? They have put up the creeds. They have marked out their area. Nothing comes out, nothing comes in. So these are our people. We don't. If you want to come in, no. If you want to go out, no. You are our property. Why do they have church ledgers? Even in the Bible, there was no ledger for the church. The ledger, there's only one ledger in heaven, isn't it? But they want all these church ledgers and say, and when they take your name out of that ledger, they make you feel like that you have been taken out of the book of life. Alas, there's only one ledger. Don't worry. What you need to do is to make sure you are following what is called the reformatory movement, and doing Bible whatever, for any basis of doctrine support, look for a thus said the Lord. If there's nothing like that, someone is being scammed, isn't it? Point 3, it says, a creed and gifts that stand apart in direct opposition to each other. Now, what is our position as a people? The Bible is our creed. We reject everything in the form of human creed. Yeah, the Bible should be our creed. When we hear someone saying, oh, we have, as a church, put up this so that's enough. We need to find what does the Bible say about any motion. And here it says, we take the Bible and the gifts of the Spirit, embracing the faith, and that thus the Lord will teach us from time to time. So from time to time, God will teach us. There's no time that God will be ever silent. But when we put a creed, what are we saying? We are saying, stop talking. We want what we have. That's it. We don't want any more of God. So the creed shuts the Lord away. That's why, do you see why God had to formulate a 12 disciple movement, and he has got a reformatory movement in our time? Because people have set stacks in their in their churches. And in this, we take a position against the formation of a creed. We are not taking one step in what we are doing toward becoming Babylon. So what is Babylon? Babylon is taking creeds and taking and setting stacks. Someone says, we are not Babylon, we are Laodicea. But the fact that you are setting stacks and say we need no, and we are good and increased with goods, we have need of nothing. To God is Babylonish spirit. It's Babylonish speaking. And God is saying, come out of here. Join the reformatory movement. And this is what will bring us to the earth being lightened with the glory of God. So this is our lesson, brethren. I hope it was easy for everyone to understand the difference between a church and a movement. One is governed by God and keeps the precepts of God. Another, the precepts of human creeds or the beast. The beast, when we are talking of the beast in Revelation, just know it's human, because all men are beasts. Go and read Ecclesiastic chapter 3 from verse 19. It will tell you we are beasts. So when Revelation is talking about beasts, just know it's a human being. Those who are worshiping the beast, they are worshiping men. Do you understand? So the creeds of men or Bible as a creed, Reformatory movement or the churches, it's up for you to take which one satisfies your heart. It's up to us. We all have a choice of what we want. If the Reformatory movement is what is moving your heart, then pray hard and for God to open more light, that you have power of choice and power to do and to dare. If you want the church, it's still a choice, but you have to calculate all the consequences. Do you want to meet that in the day of God? If your answer is no, then try again to join the Reformatory movement. So with these words, I say, may God bless the reading of His word, and all those who are watching from BSM TV, come again Saturday. We've got many lessons that are prepared for the flock of God. May God bless the reading of His word.